She had no money, no home, and a sleeping child in her arms, and every door in town had already closed on her. Then one cowboy stopped walking. He looked into her tired eyes, and made a choice that would change two lives forever. Stay till the end, because this Wild West story proves something you won't forget, that one act of kindness can rewrite a family's whole destiny. And if stories of courage and quiet compassion move you, hit like, subscribe, and stay close, because William has more tales like this one waiting for you. The afternoon sun stretched long and gold across the empty platform, the kind of light that makes even dust look like it's on fire before it settles. The last train had already gone, its whistle fading into the flatlands, and now there was nothing left but silence and the creak of an old wooden bench under the weight of a woman who had nowhere else to sit. Her name was Mary. Her dress was the color of dried mud from weeks on the road, torn at the hem, and beside her sat a suitcase so light it barely counted as luggage, a family Bible, a folded blanket, and one photograph of a husband she had buried only months before. Against her chest slept her son, Ben, not yet 3 years old, his small face pale from hunger and restless nights on hard ground. She brushed the hair from his forehead and blinked back tears she refused to let fall in public. Dignity, her husband used to say, was the one thing nobody could take from you unless you handed it over yourself. So she sat. And she waited. Not far off, a rancher named Jacob rode toward town after dropping off supplies, 40 years old, weathered by sun and work, known across the county not for what he owned but for how he treated people who had nothing. Something made him slow his horse near the station. Most travelers had already cleared out, yet this one woman remained, holding her sleeping boy tighter every time a stranger walked past without looking at her. He noticed the boy's worn-through shoes. The patched blanket. The quiet way she refused to ask anyone for a thing. He tied off his horse and crossed the platform slowly, careful not to startle her, hat already coming off his head before he spoke. "Ma'am," he said, gentle as he could manage, "have you and your boy eaten today?" She hesitated, ashamed of an honest answer. "Not since yesterday morning." He didn't say another word right away. He just reached into his saddle bag, pulled out bread, dried beef, an apple, a small bottle of milk, and set it in her hands without asking for a single thing back. "Feed the boy first," was all he said. Ben woke slow and blinking, then took the bread like it was the finest meal he'd ever tasted, and watching that hungry child eat did something to Jacob he wasn't prepared for. He sat at a careful distance on the platform edge and let her talk if she wanted to, asking nothing, pushing nothing. And when she finally spoke, about the illness that took her husband, about selling everything just to survive, about door after door closing on a widow with a child, Jacob looked out over the endless prairie and said words that would end up changing both their lives. "My ranch could use another pair of hands." What Mary didn't know yet, was that this one sentence, spoken by a stranger at a nearly empty train station, was about to become the turning point of her entire life. The ranch house came into view just as the sky turned the color of a dying ember, and Jacob carried sleeping Ben inside while Mary followed a half-step behind, still not quite believing a stranger had opened his door without asking for anything in return. The warmth from the fireplace hit her like something physical, melting a cold that had settled so deep into her bones she'd almost forgotten what warm even felt like. The smell of fresh bread and beef stew filled the room, and her eyes filled again, not from grief this time, but from something close to relief. Ben stirred, blinked at the fire, the food, the safety of it all, and whispered, "Mama, are we home?" She smiled through it. "Not yet, sweetheart. But maybe we're finally somewhere kind." Jacob knelt beside the boy. "As long as you're here," he said, "nobody goes hungry." That was the last hard question either of them asked. That night. The following morning, Jacob walked her through the property, chickens needing feed, vegetables needing harvest, laundry piling up, meals to stretch across a table of hired hands. None of it was easy work. She did it anyway, sunrise to dusk, without a single complaint, because gratitude, she'd decided, was best proven with your hands and not your words. Ben trailed Jacob everywhere, laughing at galloping horses, giggling the first time Jacob lifted him onto a gentle pony, and slowly, a ranch that had gone quiet since Jacob lost his own family years back began filling up with sound again. Not everyone approved. A neighboring rancher rode out one afternoon just to say his piece. "You're trusting strangers too easy. You don't even know that woman." Jacob didn't flinch. "I know enough," he said. "I see a mother who refused to give up, even when life gave her every reason to." The words landed hard enough that the man had nothing left to say. Weeks turned into months. Color came back into Mary's face. Fear left her eyes, replaced by something steadier, not charity earned, but respect, built one honest day of labor at a time. One evening, watching the sun drop behind the fields in streaks of orange and violet, she finally said what had been sitting in her chest for weeks. "You didn't just feed us," she told him. "You gave my son a reason to smile again." Jacob kept his eyes on the horizon. "I only opened a door," he said quietly. "You were the one brave enough to walk through it." Neither of them said much after that. They didn't need to. But neither of them yet understood that the deepest chapter of their story hadn't even started. Because winter was coming. And winter, on that frontier, had a way of testing exactly what a family was truly made of. Months rolled on, and the ranch that once sat silent as an empty church now had a pulse to it, Ben's laughter carrying across the fields most afternoons, Mary's hands turning the house into something that finally felt lived in, not just occupied. The same townsfolk who once looked past a widow and her child at a train station now spoke her name with something closer to admiration. Then winter came early that year, and it came hard. Snow buried the prairie in white, and a fierce storm rolled through the county trapping several travelers dangerously close to Jacob's land. Mary didn't hesitate. She lit every fireplace in the house, put pots of food on to boil, and turned spare rooms into shelter for strangers she'd never met. Jacob rode straight into the storm himself, guiding stranded families back through the whiteout to safety, because he remembered exactly what it felt like to be the one left out in the cold with nowhere to go. When the frightened travelers finally reached the house, they found warm food, dry blankets, and faces that actually looked glad to see them, and more than one of them said quietly, almost in disbelief, that this ranch had somehow become a place where hope still lived. Word spread through town fast after that. The same people who once turned Mary away now spoke of her strength, her steadiness, the quiet grace she carried through hardship most folks would have crumbled under. She never needed their pity, it turned out. She only ever needed one honest chance. Then came the evening that changed everything for good. Snow was falling soft outside the window when Ben came running across the yard, wrapped his small arms around Jacob's legs, and looked up at him with a question that had clearly been building in his chest for weeks. "Can I call you Pa?" Jacob's eyes went wet almost instantly. He knelt down to the boy's level and answered without a moment's hesitation. "Son, you already have." Mary stood frozen in the doorway, watching the man who once handed a stranger bread at a train station become, without ever meaning to, the father her son had needed his whole short life. She thanked him softly for believing in two people nobody else would even look at twice. Jacob just shook his head. "You came here looking for a safe place," he told her. "Instead, you gave this house a family again." From that night forward, they faced every season together, not as strangers who'd crossed paths by chance, but as a family stitched together by choice, by trust, by kindness offered when it cost something to give. And maybe that's the part of this story worth carrying with you long after it ends, that the greatest miracles rarely arrive with grand promises or perfect timing. They arrive quietly, in the shape of one person choosing to walk toward someone the rest of the world already walked past. If this story found its way into your heart, don't just scroll on. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes kindness has the power to change a life, because sometimes, one small act of compassion is all it takes to build a future nobody thought was possible.